Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. If you're using this to fall asleep, get cozy, and relax, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Alright, let's get into the story. When I was 7 or 8 years old, life in my small hometown felt like a bubble of safety. Crime was nearly non-existent. Sure, there were occasional thefts or break-ins, but nothing like murders or violent crimes ever darkened our quiet streets. So when I tell you I spent my days running wild in the woods near my house, don't think my parents were reckless. They didn't need to hover. The world we lived in gave them no reason to. My two best friends at the time, Jess and Emma, and I were inseparable, and those woods were our playground. We'd spend hours building dens, little hideouts we'd craft from branches and leaves, like secret forts where we could escape the world. Our favorite den was one we'd made our own, tucked away in a secluded spot far from any trails, hidden from view except through its narrow entrance. It was our sanctuary, a place where we'd laugh and play until the sky started to dim and we had to head home. Back then, Jess, Emma, and I were big believers in the supernatural. Aliens, ghosts, you name it, we were convinced they were real. Jess, especially, was obsessed, always spinning tales about extraterrestrial visitors or restless spirits. One afternoon, we were sprawled out in our den, giggling and chatting about the usual things 7 and 8-year-olds talk about: school, toys, and, of course, our favorite spooky topics. Jess sat facing the entrance, her back to the dense woods, while Emma and I faced her, our backs to the opening. The air was warm, filled with the hum of summer and our carefree laughter. We were in the middle of a silly debate, probably about whether ghosts could walk through walls, when a faint rustling broke through our chatter. We froze, the sound cutting through our giggles like a cold breeze. For a few seconds, we sat in silence, straining to hear. The woods were alive with small noises: birds, wind, squirrels. But this was different, heavier, deliberate. Jess's eyes lit up, and with a mischievous grin, she whispered, "It's an alien." Emma and I burst out laughing, too young to sense any real danger. The idea of an alien lurking in our woods was thrilling, not terrifying. We brushed it off and went back to our games, the rustling forgotten as quickly as it had come. A few minutes later, though, it happened again, louder this time, closer. The crunch of leaves and twigs snapped us out of our play. Jess suggested, "Alien?" again, but her voice faltered, her usual confidence replaced by a flicker of unease. Emma and I exchanged glances, still more amused than alarmed, but the mood in the den had shifted. We kept playing, trying to recapture the lightness, but the air felt heavier now, the woods quieter, as if they were holding their breath. 5 minutes later, Jess's face changed. Her eyes widened, her mouth dropped open, and a look of pure terror froze her features. Emma and I stopped mid-sentence, our laughter dying in our throats. Jess wasn't looking at us anymore. She was staring over our shoulders, toward the entrance of the den. Her fear was contagious, creeping into my chest like ice. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Jess didn't answer, just kept staring, her breath shallow and quick. Slowly, Emma and I turned to follow her gaze, dread pooling in our stomachs. What I saw in that moment burned itself into my memory, a snapshot I'll never shake. About 10 feet away, partially hidden behind a tall bush, stood a man. The bushes were dense, but we could see him from the top of his head down to just above his mouth. He was white-bald, with deep wrinkles etched into his forehead like scars. But it was his eyes that stopped my heart. Even from that distance, they were unmistakable, pitch black, solid and unblinking, like twin voids that swallowed the light. There was no white, no color, just an endless, unnatural darkness that seemed to pull at me, pinning me in place. For 10 agonizing seconds, we stared at him, and he stared back. The world felt suspended, time stretching into something thick and suffocating. Then, as if he suddenly realized we'd seen him, he jolted. His head snapped to the side, and he bolted, crashing through the underbrush with a speed that didn't match the stillness he'd held moments before. The spell broke, and panic surged through us. We scrambled to our feet, hearts pounding, and ran. We didn't look back, didn't speak, just tore through the woods, branches snagging at our clothes, our feet pounding the dirt. Emma's house was the closest, so we sprinted there, bursting through the door and collapsing in her room, gasping for air. Safe behind closed doors, we huddled together, our breaths ragged as we tried to process what had just happened. Words tumbled out in a rush as we recounted the details, desperate to make sense of it. Emma and I described the man, the bald head, the wrinkled forehead, those horrifying black eyes, and found our stories matched perfectly. Jess, though, was quieter, her face still pale. When she finally spoke, she was adamant. It was an alien. Her voice shook, but her conviction was unshakable. Emma didn't say what she thought, her silence heavy with uncertainty. I didn't know what to believe, torn between Jess's insistence and the creeping realization that what we'd seen might have been something far more human and far more dangerous. We made a pact not to tell anyone. Who would believe 3 kids claiming they'd seen a man with black eyes in the woods? They'd call us liars, or worse, laugh it off as a childish fantasy. Instead, we poured our fear onto paper, each of us sketching what we'd seen. The drawings were eerily similar. Bald head, deep wrinkles, those empty, black eyes staring back from the page. It was our secret, a shared trauma we buried deep. Now, 10 years later, I'm 18, and the belief in aliens and ghosts that once defined my childhood has faded into nostalgia. I've never gone back to those woods, and the memory of that day has taken on a different weight. Looking back, I wonder if that man was just a drifter, drawn by the sound of young girls laughing in a secluded den. Or maybe his intentions were darker, his presence a prelude to something we escaped only because Jess's sharp eyes caught him in time. The thought that he was watching us the whole time, silent, hidden, waiting, still sends a shiver down my spine. I'm grateful every day that Jess saw him when she did, because I don't want to imagine what might have happened if she hadn't. I live in a small, tight-knit town where everybody knows everybody else. The kind of place where you can't walk down the street without waving at half a dozen familiar faces. It's a comforting bubble, one I've grown up in my whole life. For the past 8 months, I've been working at the local Wendy's, pulling shifts that typically run from 2 or 3 in the afternoon until around 12:30 or 1 o'clock at night. It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and I've settled into the rhythm of it. Outside of my job, I spend a lot of time volunteering, at the elementary schools, helping with reading programs or field days, and at church, where I assist with youth groups or community events. It's how I've come to know just about every kid in town. Their faces, their names, their quirks, they're all etched into my memory. Which is why what happened one night shook me to my core and made me demand a complete change to my work schedule. It was a Wednesday night, and I just finished a long shift, clocking out a little after 1 a.m. The town was asleep, the streets empty under the glow of scattered streetlights. My drive home takes me past 4 large fields, 2 for crops, 2 for cattle, stretching out into the darkness, their edges blurring into the night. With school in session, kids were usually tucked in bed by this hour, so you can imagine my shock when I spotted 2 children walking along the side of the road. My headlights caught them just as I rounded a bend, a boy and a girl, trudging through the grass, their small figures stark against the vast, shadowy fields. The boy looked young, maybe first-grade age, with a blonde bowl cut that gleamed faintly in the light. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, simple clothes that seemed oddly out of place for a late-night stroll. The girl was older, probably 5th or 6th grade, with curly brown hair that fell to her shoulders. Her dress was the kind you'd put on a kid for Easter Sunday, frilly formal, but stained with mud and grass, as if it had been worn through a day of rough play and never washed. I slowed my car, my heart picking up speed. These weren't kids I recognized, and I knew every kid in this town. Something about them felt wrong, like they didn't belong here. I pulled over a few feet ahead of them, my tires crunching on the gravel shoulder, and rolled down my window just enough to call out. "Are you kids all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the unease creeping up my spine. They didn't look at me. Their heads stayed down, their eyes fixed on the ground as they kept walking, slow and deliberate. The girl's voice broke the silence, steady and clear. "We're fine, but we could use a ride home." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening. "Where are your parents?" "You should be home. It's late, and you've got school tomorrow." My words felt hollow, like I was trying to convince myself as much as them. The girl responded without missing a beat, her tone unchanged. "Our parents are at home. Take us to them." A strange pull tugged at me, an urge to unlock the doors and let them in. Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic, like a lullaby that dulled my instincts. But something deeper, a primal gut-level fear, held me back. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay sharp. "What are your names?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to betray my nerves. "Let us in and take us home," she said, her words identical to before, but sharper now, edged with impatience. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog her voice had stirred in my mind. "Why aren't you already home?" I pressed, my heart thudding against my ribs. "Let us in and take us home," she repeated, and this time there was no mistaking the anger in her tone. It cut through the night air, cold and commanding. My hand shook as I reached for my phone, clutching it like a lifeline. "What's your mom's number?" "Let me call her." "I'm sure she's worried about you," I said, forcing myself to sound firm, to hold my ground. Inside, though, I was unraveling. That soothing pull was still there, whispering that they were just kids, that they wouldn't hurt me, that I should help them. It was like a voice in my head, soft and insistent, drowning out my fear. Just as my fingers brushed the door lock, ready to give in, the girl looked up. Her face tilted into the dim glow of my headlights, and I saw her eyes. They were all black solid, glistening voids where eyes should have been. No whites, no irises, just an endless darkness that seemed to swallow the light around them. The sight snapped me out of whatever trance I'd been slipping into. A scream tore from my throat, raw and involuntary, as terror flooded my veins. The kids lunged forward, their small hands banging on the car window, their voices rising into a frantic chorus. "Let us in! Let us in!" The boy's fists pounded against the glass, and the girl yanked the door handle, her black eyes locked on mine. I slammed my foot in the gas, the car lurching forward as I peeled away, tires screeching against the pavement. My heart hammered in my chest, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see them chasing after me, but the road was empty. They were gone, vanished into the night as if they'd never been there at all. I drove home in a daze, my hands trembling on the wheel. The image of those black eyes burned into my mind. When I got inside, I locked every door, checked every window, and sat on my couch, unable to sleep. The next day, I started asking around, describing what I'd seen to anyone who'd listen. That's when I first heard about black-eyed children, a term that sent chills down my spine. I'd never encountered anything like it before, and the stories I found online only deepened my fear. Tales of kids with those same unnatural eyes, appearing out of nowhere, demanding entry, their presence laced with an inexplicable dread. I changed my work schedule after that, refusing to take any more late-night shifts. The thought of driving past those fields again, of seeing those kids, or something worse, waiting in the darkness, was more than I could bear. I've never seen them since, and I pray I never do. But some nights, when I'm alone, I still hear that girl's voice in my head, calm and clear, urging me to let them in. And I wonder what would have happened if I had. As a child, I cherished our family trips to the mountains. Every summer, my parents and I would pile into the car, leaving behind the sweltering, crowded city to seek refuge in the cool, quiet embrace of the hills. We stayed at my grandmother's house, a small, weathered structure perched atop a hill, overlooking a vast forest that stretched out like an endless sea of green. The house was ancient, its wooden beams creaking with stories of decades past, and its isolation gave it an almost magical quality. For an 8-year-old girl like me, it was a place of wonder, where every corner held the promise of adventure. Our second day in the house had been long and exhausting, full of hiking, exploring, and breathing in the crisp mountain air. By the time evening rolled around, we were all worn out, so we turned in early. My bedroom was at the far end of the house, closer to the dining area than to my parents' room. The dining area itself was a simple space, with a sturdy wooden table and a single wall that backed up against the forest outside. That night, I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the quiet hum of the mountain night. A loud bang jolted me awake. My eyes snapped open, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of the sound. It had come from behind me, sharp and deliberate, like something heavy striking wood. But as I blinked into the darkness, I realized I wasn't in my bed. I was sitting on the cold floor of the dining room, my back pressed against the wall, my legs crossed in front of me. Confusion flooded my mind, followed by a creeping dread. How had I gotten here? The last thing I remembered was drifting off in my bedroom, the soft creak of the house fading into my dreams. Panic surged through me. I scrambled to my feet, my bare toes curling against the chilly floorboards, and ran to my parents' room as fast as my legs could carry me. Their door was ajar, and I slipped inside, my breath hitching as I crawled into bed beside my mother. I didn't wake her. I just needed to feel her warmth, to know I wasn't alone. Before I drifted back to sleep, I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. It was around 5 a.m., the sky outside still cloaked in pre-dawn gray. The next morning, I sat in the living room, my knees pulled up to my chest, replaying the night's events in my mind. The memory of waking up in the dining room, pressed against that wall, felt like a nightmare I couldn't shake. I needed answers, so I approached my mother as she sipped her coffee in the kitchen. "Mom," I asked, my voice small, "have I ever sleepwalked before?" She looked at me, her brow furrowing with concern, and shook her head. "No, sweetheart, never." I hesitated, then turned to my grandmother, who was peeling apples at the counter. "Grandma, what about Dad? Did he ever sleepwalk?" She chuckled, her knife pausing mid-slice. "Oh, your father. Only in this house. Every summer we came here, I'd find him in the dining room, sitting cross-legged against that wall. He'd be fast asleep, like it was the most natural thing in the world." She laughed again, and my mother joined in, their amusement filling the room. But I wasn't laughing. Inside, my stomach churned, a cold knot of fear tightening with every word. I forced a smile, trying to act brave, but my mind was screaming. I decided not to tell them what had happened. I was only 8, and I didn't want to seem scared or silly. The next 2 nights were no better. Strange things kept happening, small, unsettling moments that chipped away at my sense of safety. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to faint whispers, too soft to make out, or the sound of footsteps pacing just beyond my door. Once I swore I saw a shadow flicker across the wall, but when I turned on the light, nothing was there. The house felt alive, watching me, waiting. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Determined to understand what was happening, I decided to set up a trap. I borrowed my dad's old camcorder and positioned it on my bed, angled to capture me as I slept. Then I rigged a small handheld camera on a shelf near the dining room wall, pointed at the spot where I'd woken up. If something was moving me in the night, I'd catch it on tape. When I woke the next morning, my heart pounded with a mix of dread and anticipation. I checked the cameras, my fingers trembling as I rewound the footage. What I saw made my blood run cold. The bedroom camera showed me sleeping peacefully at first, my small form curled under the blankets. Then, around 2 a.m., I sat up, my movements jerky and unnatural. Instead of walking, I crawled, on all fours like a baby, out of bed and through the door, my head bowed low. The dining room camera picked up where the first left off. I crawled into the frame, sat cross-legged against the wall, and stayed there, motionless. But the most chilling part was my voice. I was talking, my words soft but clear, as if responding to someone unseen. "No, I can't hear you well," I said. Then, "No, I can't let you in." Finally, I asked, "Who are you?" The moment those words left my lips, the camera cut out, the screen dissolving into static. I felt sick, my skin prickling with goosebumps. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I showed the recordings to my parents, my hands shaking as I played the footage. My mother's face paled, her coffee mug forgotten on the table. My father's expression was worse, his eyes widened, and a look of raw fear crossed his face, something I'd never seen before. They exchanged a glance, then called my grandmother over. Together, they sat me down at the dining table, their voices low and serious. My father pulled out a stack of old drawings, yellowed with age, and spread them across the table. "These are from when I was about your age," he said, his voice tight. "I drew them while we stayed in this house." The drawings were haunting. Most showed a stick figure, my father as a boy, standing in front of the dining room wall. On the other side of the wall was another figure, a woman with long hair and a flowing dress. Some drawings were just chaotic scribbles, jagged lines that seemed to pulse with fear. Others depicted my father being dragged by those scribbles, his stick-figure face contorted in terror. My grandmother sighed, her hands clasped tightly. I didn't think much of it at the time, she admitted. I thought they were just a child's imagination running wild. But the weirdness didn't stop with the drawings. Over the next few days, the house seemed to grow restless. We'd be sitting in the living room when a faint melody drifted through the air, the ghostly notes of a piano. We tried to dismiss it as neighbors, but the nearest house was miles away. Objects started disappearing, keys, books, a scarf, only to reappear in odd places, like the middle of the dining room floor. I began noticing tiny bumps on the dining room wall, hundreds of them, like braille etched into the paint. Then I got sick, horribly, inexplicably sick. Fever, chills, and a weakness that pinned me to my bed for days. Some mornings, I could barely stand, my body heavy with an exhaustion that felt unnatural. A few days before we were set to leave, my grandmother noticed something new, a trickle of dirty, grayish water seeping down the dining room wall. The smell was unbearable, like rotten decay, thick enough to make us gag. We assumed a dead animal had gotten trapped in the walls, so we called a handyman to investigate. What he found was far worse. He broke through the wall, revealing a hidden staircase that descended below ground level, leading to a sealed room. We stood back, hearts pounding, as he called the police. The officers who entered the house emerged pale and shaken, carrying evidence that turned my stomach. There were dozens of candles, their wax melted into grotesque shapes, and a bucket of stagnant water holding a decaying squirrel. Stacks of Ouija boards, their surfaces worn and scratched, sat beside massive books filled with strange, unreadable symbols. They found a rotting doll, its fabric crumbling, and an old dress stained with a dried orange-red substance we all feared was blood. A heavy, ancient piano, its keys yellowed and chipped, stood in the corner. The room was a shrine to something dark, something wrong. The police questioned us relentlessly. Did these items belong to us? When had we moved in? We explained that the house was my grandmother's, that we only visited in the summers. The investigation dragged on for 3 months, and the truth that emerged was chilling. The house's previous owner had used the hidden room to perform rituals, attempting to contact his deceased wife. The stained dress was hers, preserved like a relic. The police confirmed that the room had been used for black magic, with the owner sneaking in weekly to conduct his ceremonies, even while we were staying there. He'd slip in and out through a concealed entrance, unnoticed, while we slept. The story spread like wildfire through the small mountain town, becoming local legend. My family never spoke of it again, choosing to bury the experience and move on. We never returned to the house, and my grandmother sold it soon after. But the memory haunts me still. Growing up, I became paranoid, jumping at shadows, always checking behind doors. The footage of me crawling, the drawings my father made, the piano music that had no source, they're pieces of a puzzle I'll never fully understand. Whatever was in that house, whatever spoke to me in the night, it left a mark on me, one that time hasn't erased. One chilly afternoon at work, my eyes drifted to the small landscaped area just outside the building, a patch of grass framed by low shrubs and a few benches, usually empty except for the occasional bird or squirrel. But that day, something caught my attention. A man lying face down on a grass, his body unnaturally still. He wore nothing but a pair of shorts, no shirt, no shoes, despite the biting cold that had settled over the town. His bare skin pressed against the frosted ground, and his head was buried in the grass, as if he'd collapsed there and hadn't moved since. The sight sent a jolt of unease through me. Who would lie like that, half naked in the cold, in the middle of the day? I hurried to grab a coworker, my voice low but urgent. "You've got to see this," I said, leading them back to the window. But in the few seconds it took us to return, the man had moved. He was no longer sprawled out. Now he was dragging himself forward, his forearms digging into the dirt, pulling his body along inch by inch. His lower half legs and torso hung limp, trailing behind him like dead weight. His head bobbed and shook with each movement, an erratic, almost mechanical motion that made my skin crawl. He inched toward the edge of the landscaped area, where a low concrete drop separated the grass from the pavement. Without pausing, he pulled himself over the edge, landing with a sickening thud on the pavement below. his body twisted so his face pressed against the wall of our building. My coworker's eyes widened, and they fumbled for their phone. "We need to call 911, they said, their voice tight with worry. He might be hurt, but something about the man, the way he moved, the unnatural stillness before, kept us rooted in place, too unnerved to go out and check on him. Just as my coworker got through to emergency services, the man flipped over, his body jerking as if pulled by invisible strings. He was facing us now, staring directly through the window. His face was a nightmare, a twisted, strained smile stretched across his features, every muscle taut, like he was forcing the expression through pain. His eyes were wide, unblinking, locked on us with an intensity that made my heart stutter. He raised himself onto his knees, his arms extending forward, reaching toward us as if he could claw his way through the glass. The emergency operator's voice crackled through the phone, promising to send help, but before my coworker could respond, the man moved again. He lunged forward, dragging one knee across the pavement, then the other, his movements quick and jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. One arm stayed pointed at us, rigid and unwavering, while the other flailed in strange, unnatural angles. His knees scraped against the rough pavement, blood welling up and streaking down his legs, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He rounded the corner of the building, disappearing from view, his bloody trail glinting in the afternoon light. We rushed to the break room, our voices overlapping as we filled in our other coworkers. The air was thick with tension, everyone crowding near the windows, trying to catch a glimpse of where he'd gone. Then a loud metallic banging erupted from the back of the building, each crash reverberating through the walls. I crept to the back door, my pulse pounding in my ears, and peered through the small window. There he was, hanging from the handle of the dumpster, his body dangling like a rag doll. He propelled himself forward, slamming his head and shoulders into the metal side of the dumpster with a force that should have knocked him out. Blood streamed from his forehead, matting his hair, but he kept going, each impact louder than the last. He dropped to the ground, his body crumpling, and grabbed a jagged piece of wood from the pavement. When he turned, his eyes locked onto mine through the glass, that same unblinking, twisted smile spreading across his face. My breath caught, and I stumbled backward, slamming the door shut and locking it with trembling hands. One of my coworkers was already on the phone, updating emergency services, their voice shaking as they described the man's behavior. Outside, a car alarm blared, sharp and insistent. We raced to the side window and saw him again, this time attacking a coworker's car. His body was bent backward at an impossible angle, his spine arched so far it looked like it might snap. His head tilted toward the sky, his arms limp at his sides, still clutching the piece of wood. He whirled in circles, the momentum swinging the wood into the car, denting the hood, smashing the side mirrors. With a final violent spin, the wood cracked the passenger window, the glass spiderwebbing under the blow. Then, as suddenly as he'd started, he straightened up, turned toward us and pointed. That smile, wide, strained, and utterly wrong, never left his face. He dropped to the ground in a heap, his body limp, and crawled under the car, disappearing beneath it. The police arrived minutes later, their flashlights cutting through the dimming light as they approached the car. They had to drag him out by his feet, his body ragdoll limp, his eyes still wide and unblinking. One officer tried to talk to him, asking his name, what he was doing, but the man only stared, silent and unnerving. Then, without warning, he shrieked a high-pitched guttural sound that made my blood run cold, and lunged at the officer, his teeth snapping. I couldn't see the full struggle from inside, but later, I heard he'd bitten the cop hard enough to draw blood. The officers wrestled him into restraints, pinning his arms and legs as he thrashed and shrieked, his voice echoing in the quiet afternoon. An ambulance arrived soon after, and the paramedics strapped him to a gurney, securing his wrists and ankles with heavy straps. Another officer took our statements, jotting down every detail as we recounted the horrifying sequence of events. I was halfway through explaining what I'd seen when the man on the gurney moved. Somehow, he'd torn his torso free from the restraints, his head snapping up to stare directly at me. "Hi," he said, his voice calm and clear, that twisted smile still plastered across his face. The word hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. The paramedics tightened the straps, and the ambulance doors slammed shut, whisking him away. A week later, the police followed up. They told us the man had been high on bath salts, the drug that had turned him into something unrecognizable, something feral. He'd been admitted to a hospital, and criminal charges were filed for the damage to my coworker's car. The explanation made sense, but it didn't erase the image of his face. That smile, those eyes, the way he'd move like something not entirely human. 6 months later, I was walking into work, the memory of that day still lingering like a shadow. As I passed the landscaped area, I froze. There he was, sitting on one of the benches, his body shaking violently, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't look at me, didn't move, but the sight of him was enough to make my heart race. I called the police immediately, my voice trembling as I described him. By the time they arrived, he was gone, vanished into the town's quiet streets. I don't know if he ever got the help he needed, but I live in dread of seeing him again. Every time I glance out at that landscaped area, I half expect to see him there, lying face down in the grass, waiting to start the nightmare all over again. Staying up late is my thing. While most people are tucked into bed by midnight, I'm sprawled on the couch, the glow of the television casting flickering shadows across the living room. Watching shows until 3 a.m. is my bread and butter, especially when I'm home alone. My dad works away for 2 weeks at a time, coming back for just 1 week before heading out again, so I've got plenty of opportunities to indulge in my late-night marathons. It's been this way since I was a kid, though things got lonelier after my mom passed away from cancer when I was 12. Now, at 18, it's just me and my dad in our small Canadian home, with its long, brutal winters that make those late nights feel even cozier. Well, me, my dad, and Tuxedo, my black and white cat, whose name fits his dapper fur perfectly. I got him when I turned 16, and he's been my faithful companion, keeping me company through countless chilly nights. Our living room is my sanctuary. There's a big red couch right in front of the TV, where I plant myself for hours, and a smaller red couch off to the right, Tuxedo's favorite spot to curl up. He also loves the small table by the large living room window, where he perches to watch the world outside. The window is a focal point of the room, its wide panes offering a clear view of the front yard and the street beyond. My dad has always been adamant about closing the curtains at night. It's dangerous to let people see inside, he'd say, worried that an open window might tempt a thief. But I've always thought that was overcautious. A house with lights on, especially late at night, feels safer to me than a dark, empty one. So when Dad's away, I leave the curtains open, partly out of laziness, partly because I've never really believed anyone would target our house. On this particular night, I was deep into a documentary, something gripping about a couple held hostage in Australia, the kind of true crime story that only airs in the wee hours. Tuxedo, unimpressed by my choice of entertainment, had abandoned the small couch and was perched on the table by the window, his green eyes fixed on the darkness outside. It was just past 11 p.m., and the house was quiet except for the low hum of the TV. During a commercial break, Tuxedo let out a soft, plaintive cry, his tail twitching as he stared toward the front door, which sat to the left of the window. He does this sometimes during the day when he spots a neighbor or a delivery person, but at night it was unusual. I glanced over, assuming he'd seen a stray cat or a rabbit hopping through the yard. But his cries grew more insistent, laced with a wariness that made the hair on my arms stand up. Something about his posture, tense, alert, told me this wasn't just a passing animal. I muted the TV, the sudden silence amplifying the creaks of the house. "What's up, Tux?" I asked, my voice light but tinged with unease. He didn't move, his gaze locked on the door. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to stand, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and walked to the top of the staircase that led down to the front entrance. Our house has a split-level layout. The living room is on the top floor, the front door is on a middle landing, and another staircase descends from there to the basement. The door itself has frosted glass panels, designed to let in light while keeping things private. As I stood at the top of the stairs, peering down, my breath caught in my throat. Through the frosted glass, I saw a large, shadowy figure, its outline distorted but unmistakably human. It was moving, shifting slightly, and I could just make out the glint of something metallic in its hand, scraping against the door. My knees buckled, and I gripped the railing to keep from collapsing. This wasn't my dad. He was hundreds of miles away on a work trip. At 11 p.m., No one should be at our door, let alone trying to pry it open. Fear flooded my system, sharp and paralyzing, but something else surged alongside it, a fierce, protective instinct. I was alone, with no one to help, and Tuxedo was depending on me. I couldn't let this intruder get inside. My heart pounded as I darted back to the couch, snatching my cell phone from the armrest. My fingers trembled, but I forced myself to act. I flipped on the exterior light switch, flooding the front porch with a harsh white glow. The figure froze, caught in the sudden brightness. Through the frosted glass, I saw him more clearly now, a man tall and broad-shouldered, his face a jagged blur. Our eyes met, or at least I felt them lock, his gaze piercing through the glass with a startled intensity. Adrenaline surged, and I shouted, my voice louder than I expected. "Leave now. I'm calling the police. Leave." The words spilled out in a rush, fueled by panic and defiance. I didn't even finish before he bolted, his shadow lurching away from the door. I heard the thud of footsteps on the porch, then the squeal of tires as a car peeled out from across the street. I ran to the window, peering through the open curtains, but he was gone. The street was empty, the night swallowing any trace of him. All that remained was a crude crowbar, lying abandoned on the front step, its metal glinting under the porch light. I stood there, my breath ragged, my phone still clutched in my hand. The reality of what had just happened crashed over me. Someone had tried to break into our house while I was awake, while the lights were on, while I was just feet away. My dad's warnings about the curtains echoed in my mind, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my own naivety. I locked the door, double-checked every window, and sank onto the couch, Tuxedo leaping up to curl against me. His warmth grounded me, but my mind raced. What had that man wanted? Was he just a thief, looking for an easy target? Or was it something worse, something I didn't dare imagine? The thought that he might have gotten inside if I'd been asleep, or if Tuxedo hadn't noticed him, made my stomach churn. Tuxedo saved my life that night. If he hadn't been watching the window, if his cries hadn't pulled me from the couch, I might not have seen the man until it was too late. I don't know what would have happened, and I don't want to. From that night on, I closed the curtains religiously, no matter how lazy I felt. The sense of invincibility I'd carried, my belief that a lit-up house was safe, shattered. I still love my late-night TV marathons, but now every creak of the house, every shadow outside, puts me on edge. Tuxedo still keeps me company, his green eyes scanning the darkness, and I'm grateful for him every single day. I'm an 18-year-old woman, and my best friend Kelly is the same age. We've been inseparable since elementary school, the kind of friends who share everything: secrets, laughs, and countless adventures. Over the years, we've had our fair share of creepy encounters, stories I might share one day, but this one stands out as the most unsettling. It happened on a warm afternoon when Kelly and I decided to make the most of our free time after school. We planned to visit a local swimming area, a secluded spot tucked away in the woods, known for its quiet beauty and nearby hiking trails. It's a place we'd been to before, where the water sparkles under the sun and the trails wind through dense trees, offering a peaceful escape from the world. We've always felt safe there, so we didn't think twice about heading out. We piled into Kelly's van, our spirits high as we chatted about nothing in particular: school gossip, weekend plans, the usual. When we arrived at the swimming area, the parking lot was empty, just as we'd expected. The place felt like it belonged to us, the stillness broken only by the chirping of birds and the gentle rustle of leaves. We locked the van, slung our backpacks over our shoulders, and set off down one of the trails, eager to explore. The path we chose was unfamiliar, a narrow dirt track that twisted deeper into the woods than we'd ventured before. Curiosity drove us forward, our conversation flowing easily as we walked, catching up on the little details of our lives. The air was warm, scented with pine and earth, and the sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled patterns on the ground. We hiked for what felt like ages, the trail stretching on until it opened into a clearing. But it wasn't a clearing, it was another body of water smaller than the swimming area, its surface still and glassy. The trail ended abruptly at the water's edge, leaving us with two choices: backtrack through the woods or find another way. We noticed a strip of mushy sand and grass bordering the water, a natural path that seemed to curve back toward the swimming area where we'd parked. It looked like an easier route, and the idea of walking along the water's edge appealed to us more than retracing our steps through the dense forest. "Let's go this way," Kelly said, her voice bright with confidence. I nodded, grateful for the decision that, in hindsight, might have saved us from something far worse. As we started along the sandy path, the water lapped gently to our right, while the woods loomed to our left, their shadows growing longer as the afternoon wore on. We kept talking, our voices carrying in the quiet, discussing everything from our favorite TV shows to our plans for the summer. My phone was in my hand, tucked against my side, a small comfort in case we needed it. The walk was long, the sand squelching under our sneakers, but we didn't mind. It wasn't until we were nearly back to the swimming area, the van just within sight, that we heard something that stopped us cold. A man's voice, came from the woods to our left. It was low, the words jumbled and indistinct, like someone muttering to themselves. We froze, our conversation dying mid-sentence. The sound was close, too close, hidden just beyond the trees. My heart kicked up a notch, and I glanced at Kelly, her eyes wide with the same unease I felt. We didn't say anything, but we picked up our pace, our footsteps quickening on the soft ground. Out here, we were alone, far from help, and the realization hit me like a punch. The swimming area was secluded, a haven when it was just us, but a trap if someone else was lurking. We tried to stay quiet, our breaths shallow as we hurried along the path. The man's voice faded, but the relief was short-lived. As we rounded a bend, the van coming into clearer view, we heard more voices, multiple men, their tones low and urgent. My stomach dropped. We slowed our steps, creeping forward, careful not to make a sound. When we reached the edge of the parking lot, we stopped, crouching slightly to stay out of sight. There, parked right beside Kelly's van, was a small, unfamiliar car. 3 men stood around it, each positioned on a different side, their postures tense, like they were guarding something. A 4th man emerged from the trail we'd hiked earlier, his stride purposeful. It was him, the one whose voice we'd heard in the woods. My blood ran cold as I realized he'd been shadowing us, close enough to hear our laughter, our chatter. The men were a mix of ages. 3 were older, their faces weathered, with graying hair and worn clothes that looked out of place for a casual day at the swimming area. The 4th, the one from the trail, was younger, maybe in his 30s, his movements quick and sharp. They weren't carrying fishing poles or picnic gear, no signs they were here to enjoy the water. They were just there in street clothes, their presence heavy with intent. When they noticed us, their conversation cut off abruptly, and 4 pairs of eyes turned to stare. The way their gazes pinned me in place, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I wanted to run, to sprint to the van and peel out of there, but my legs felt like lead. My anxiety, which I've struggled with for years, screamed that I was overreacting, that these were just guys hanging out, that I was making something out of nothing. But my gut told a different story. 4 grown men, no gear, staring at 2 teenage girls in an empty parking lot. It wasn't right. I clutched my phone tighter, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. Kelly's face was pale, but she moved first, striding toward the van with a confidence I didn't feel. I followed, my eyes darting between the men, their stares never wavering. We were only 7 feet from them now, close enough to see the lines on their faces, the way their eyes tracked our every move. Kelly fumbled with her keys, unlocking the driver's side door, but the passenger door stayed locked. I stood by it, shifting impatiently, my nerves fraying with every second. "Come on, Kelly," I whispered under my breath, glancing back at the men. They hadn't moved, but their silence was louder than any words. I kept checking over my shoulder, fear prickling at the back of my neck, certain one of them would creep up behind me. And then, to my horror, one did. The younger man, the one from the trail, was moving toward us, his steps quick and deliberate. He was coming straight for me, his eyes locked on mine, something glinting in his hand, a knife, a tool, I couldn't tell, but it was enough to make my heart seize. I froze, my breath catching, every muscle screaming to run but unable to move. Just as he closed the distance, the passenger door clicked open. I yanked it wide, practically throwing myself inside, my hand shaking as I slammed it shut. Kelly hit the lock button, the satisfying thunk of the bolts sliding into place cutting through my panic. The man passed the van, his pace slowing as he reached the other side, but he didn't stop or look back. Kelly floored the gas, the van lurching forward as we sped out of the parking lot. I twisted in my seat, watching through the rearview mirror. The men's eyes followed us, unblinking, until we rounded a corner, and they disappeared from view. My chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing through me. We didn't stop until we found a quiet side road, where we pulled over, hidden from sight, to catch our breath and watch for the men's next move. Barely a minute passed before their car pulled out of the lot, heading in the opposite direction, its taillights fading into the dusk. As we drove back to my house, the weight of what had happened settled over us. Kelly's voice was quiet when she spoke, her hands still gripping the wheel. "That guy who came up behind you," she said, her eyes fixed on the road. "He was holding something. I don't know what it was, but he had it tight, like he was ready to use it." Her words sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I didn't want to know what it was, didn't want to imagine what might have been in his hand, or his mind. We sat in silence for the rest of the drive, the memory of those men's stares burning into us. I kept replaying the moment we chose to walk along the water instead of back through the woods. If we'd gone the other way, we would have run into that man face to face, alone in the forest, with no one to hear us scream. The thought made my skin crawl. We don't know what those men wanted, what their intentions were, but the way they watched us, the way they moved, told me it wasn't innocent. I haven't been back to that swimming area since, and I don't think I ever will. Some places, once tainted, lose their magic forever. I live in a small town in western Missouri, a close-knit community about the size of a theme park, where everyone knows everyone else's business. It's a conservative place, surrounded by wooded areas and a serene lake, where life moves at a slow, predictable pace. I'm one of 3 triplets, me, my sister Diana, and our sister Mina, who tragically passed away just hours after birth due to complications. Diana was born first, then me, and we've grown up as the closest of siblings in a bustling household of 6 kids. With so many of us, my parents are stretched thin, which means Diana and I have a lot of freedom, especially since we share the basement as our bedroom. It's the only space left in our crowded house, with one window opening to the backyard and another facing the street out front. The basement is our sanctuary, a place where we can escape the chaos upstairs and just be ourselves. A few years ago, when we were around 13, something happened that shook me to my core and still haunts me as I approach 16. It started on a night when Diana and I were up late, sprawled on our beds in the basement, watching a movie on an old laptop. The glow of the screen lit up our faces, casting long shadows on the walls covered in posters of our favorite bands and movies. It was around 1 o'clock or 2 a.m., well past when we should have been asleep, but with our parents snoring upstairs and our siblings tucked away, we felt untouchable. The movie was some cheesy horror flick, the kind that's more funny than scary, and we were giggling through the predictable jump scares when a sudden noise cut through our laughter. 3 sharp knocks echoed from the window facing the backyard. We froze, our eyes darting to the glass, shrouded in darkness beyond the thin curtains. The sound was deliberate, evenly spaced, like someone rapping their knuckles with purpose. My heart skipped a beat, but I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the wind or a branch tapping the window. "Probably nothing," I said, glancing at Diana, who nodded but looked uneasy. We turned back to the movie, trying to recapture the mood, but a few moments later, the knocks came again, 3 more, just as precise, just as chilling. We sat in silence, waiting, but they stopped. Relieved, we decided it was time to call it a night. We shut off the laptop, crawled into our beds, and let the quiet of the basement lull us to sleep. A week later, the memory of those knocks had faded, pushed aside by the rhythm of our daily lives. I got to the movies with my girlfriend, Kaden, a fun date filled with popcorn and stolen glances in the dark theater. She dropped me off at home late, the street outside our house bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. I crept inside, careful not to wake anyone, and made my way to the basement. The house was still, the only sound the faint hum of the fridge upstairs. But when I flicked on the basement light, I stopped dead in my tracks. Diana was sitting on her bed, her knees pulled to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Her eyes were red and puffy, her breaths hitching with quiet sobs. "Diana, what's wrong?" I asked, rushing to her side and wrapping her in a hug. Her body trembled against mine, and for a moment she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was a whisper, barely audible. I heard them again. The knocks. My stomach twisted, but I forced a calm I didn't feel. "Come on, Dee, it was probably just the house settling. Or maybe Mason messing with you." Our younger brother was notorious for his pranks, and I clung to the idea like a lifeline. But Diana shook her head, her expression grim. She slid off the bed and walked to a bare spot on the drywall, one of the few areas not covered by posters or furniture. "It sounded like this," she said, and banged her fist against the wall 3 times, each strike hard and even. The sound jolted me, loud enough to make me flinch. "Diana, stop. You'll wake Mom and Dad," I hissed, my heart racing. She nodded, stepping back, but her eyes were still wide with fear. I spent the next 20 minutes talking her down, convincing her it was just her imagination, that old houses make weird noises. Eventually, she agreed, her shoulders relaxing as she climbed back into bed. "You're right," she mumbled, pulling the covers up. "I'm just freaking myself out." She drifted off soon after, her breathing slow and steady. But I couldn't sleep. The knocks, Diana's tears, the way the basement felt colder than usual, it all gnawed at me. I lay in bed, staring at the wall beside me, the posters blurring in the dim light from a street lamp outside. The hours ticked by, the house silent except for the occasional creak. Around 3 a.m., a rustling from Diana's side of the room made me sit up. She was bolt upright in bed, her body rigid, like something out of a horror movie. Her head was turned toward the wall, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. "Diana." I called, my voice shaky. She didn't respond. "Diana." I said again, louder this time. Slowly, she turned to face me, her silhouette sharp against the faint light. Even in the darkness, I could feel her staring straight into my eyes, her gaze heavy and unyielding. I slid back against my headboard, unease crawling up my spine. "It's right next to you," she whispered, her voice trembling, like she was on the verge of tears. My blood ran cold, goosebumps erupting across my arms and legs. "Diana, what the hell is wrong with you?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended, trying to mask the fear clawing at me. I moved to throw off my covers, desperate to turn on the light and break whatever spell had gripped her, but she stopped me with a shout. "No, don't move, Jay, please. It's right next to you." Her words hit me like a physical blow, and I froze, my hand hovering over the blanket. My teeth clenched, my body trembling as the air in the room grew heavy, icy. I knew Diana wasn't lying. Why would she? But I was too terrified to look, too scared to turn my head and see what she saw. The atmosphere shifted, the darkness pressing in, and I felt exposed, like something was watching me from just beyond my bed. I forced myself to lie back down, pulling the covers up to my chin, my heart hammering so loud I thought it might burst. "Just go to sleep," I whispered, more to myself than to her. Diana didn't move, but eventually her breathing evened out, and I let myself drift, exhaustion overtaking fear. It was the hardest night's sleep I've ever had, each sound amplified, each shadow a threat. The next morning, I woke to a burning sensation on my upper thigh and stomach. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. When I lifted my shirt in front of the mirror, I gasped. Angry red scratches crisscrossed my skin, 3 on my thigh, 2 on my stomach, raw and raised like they'd been carved overnight. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone, snapping pictures of the marks before pulling my clothes back on. I marched back to the basement, where Diana was already awake, scrolling on her phone, looking calmer than she had the night before. "Diana," I said, sitting on her bed, my voice tight. "What did you see last night?" She looked up, confused, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" she asked. I explained everything, her sitting up, her warning, the scratches I just found. I showed her the photos, and her face went pale, her phone slipping from her hands. "I thought it was a dream," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't remember doing any of that. It felt like I was watching it happen, not living it. Tell me what you saw in the dream, then." I pressed, dread pooling in my stomach. "What was standing by my bed?" She hesitated, her eyes darting away, then back to mine. "The devil," she said, her voice flat but heavy with conviction. My breath caught. Neither of us had ever been religious. Science was our religion, facts our gospel. For her to say something like that, to believe it, sent a chill through me. She described it, her words slow and deliberate, like she was pulling them from a place she didn't want to revisit. It wasn't the devil of storybooks, with horns and a pitchfork. It was a woman in a tattered dress, her long black hair hanging in clumps, her jaw unhinged, stretching impossibly wide. Her eyes were black, not just dark but a suffocating void, like they could swallow you whole. Scratches covered her face, raw and bleeding, and she was reaching for me, her fingers clawing the air. Diana said she heard her scream, a guttural, choking sound, like something drowning in its own rage. I sat there stunned, the photos of my scratches burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't believe in God or demons, but I couldn't deny what had happened. The knocks, Diana's fear, the marks on my body, it was too much to dismiss. We didn't tell our parents, didn't tell anyone. How could we explain something we didn't understand ourselves? But the basement never felt the same after that. I still don't pray, don't go to church, but I believe in something now. Something was in our room that night, something that left its mark on me, and I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. I hung there, my fingers gripping the jagged edge of the floor, my body dangling over a void that seemed to swallow all light and sound. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a deafening thud against the eerie silence that enveloped me. Moments ago, I'd been exploring an abandoned building with my friends A and B as part of our urban exploration adventure, but now I was alone, suspended in darkness, my mind reeling from what had just happened. There was no cinematic flash of my life before my eyes, no comforting montage of memories, just raw primal fear and the chilling echo of a laugh that still rang in my ears. It wasn't human, that laugh. It was sinister, otherworldly, a sound that clawed at my nerves and left me trembling. I never heard anything like it, and the memory of it chilled me to the bone. The darkness was absolute, a suffocating blanket that pressed against me. I couldn't see the ground below, couldn't hear the distant roar of the sea that I knew was out there, somewhere beyond the crumbling walls of this forgotten compound. My torch, my only source of light, had slipped from my grasp during the chaos, tumbling into the abyss with a sickening crunch as its beam flickered out. I was helpless, exposed, dangling like a fool in a place where no one would hear me scream. The realization hit me hard. I was terrified, not just of falling, but of the unknown. Who or what had made that laugh? Was it still nearby, watching me from the shadows, its presence hidden by the pitch-black void? The thought sent a shiver down my spine, and for a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. It felt like sleep paralysis, that suffocating state where reality and nightmare blur, except this was real. Wasn't it? I forced a weak chuckle, the sound swallowed by the silence. "You're going mad," I muttered to myself, my voice barely a whisper. But I couldn't stay here, frozen in fear. My body was in shock, my muscles locked, but I had to move. I had to get out. "Okay, relax," I whispered, puffing out my cheeks as I tried to regulate my breathing. "Breathe. You've got this." I focused on the air moving in and out of my lungs, slow and deliberate, willing my body to respond. After what felt like an eternity, I felt a twitch in my fingers, then my arms. I channeled every ounce of strength, thrusting my body upward, hooking one arm over the ledge. The rough concrete scraped my skin, but I didn't care. With a grunt, I pulled my other arm up, using my upper body to hoist myself onto solid ground. I collapsed onto the floor, my chest heaving, my limbs trembling from the effort. For a moment, I just lay there, gathering my sanity, letting the reality of my survival sink in. Then I fumbled for my phone, my hand still shaking as I activated the flashlight. The weak beam cut through the darkness, revealing the edge of the drop I'd nearly plummeted into. I aimed the light downward, and my breath caught. The entire second floor, except for the narrow corridor I'd come from, was gone. It was as if it had never been built, just a gaping void where rooms should have been. Doors hung suspended in the air, leading to nowhere, their frames embedded in walls that bordered nothingness. The sight was surreal, disorienting, like stepping into a dream where the rules of reality no longer applied. I'd been in the building for 45 minutes, according to my phone's clock, and the weight of that time pressed on me. I needed to get back to the meetup point to find A and B to get out of this place. My body ached, sore from the physical strain of hanging and pulling myself up, but my mind was still sharp, alert to the dangers of this unfamiliar territory. I stood, brushing the dust from my clothes, and made a decision. I wouldn't tell the others about this. Not about the fall, not about the laugh. It was a mistake, I know now, but in that moment, I didn't want the night to end. I wanted to keep going, to prove I wasn't shaken. Hindsight, as they say, is both a blessing and a curse. I made my way downstairs, my phone's flashlight guiding me through the darkened corridors. My goal was to find my torch to reclaim some sense of control. The building was a maze of decay, cracked walls, scattered debris, the faint smell of mold hanging in the air. Halfway down the central corridor, I spotted it. My torch, its aluminum body scratched and dented from the fall, the top of its twist light loosened. I knelt to pick it up, my fingers brushing the cold metal, and reassembled it with care. To my relief, it flickered back to life, its beams steady and strong. Clutching it, I felt a flicker of defiance. This place wouldn't break me. The rest of my time in the building was uneventful, though the memory of that laugh lingered, a shadow at the edge of my thoughts. I retraced my steps to the room where I'd entered, where an old, rusted weight machine sat in the corner, now broken from my earlier encounter. I nearly lost an eye to its jagged metal, a clumsy misstep that felt trivial compared to what I'd just survived. I hoisted myself up to the window I'd climbed through, the cool night air hitting my face as I squeezed out. From the outside, it must have looked like I was crawling from a black hole, desperate to escape whatever horrors lurked within. I landed on the ground, my boots crunching on gravel, and muttered, "I won't miss you," to the building as I turned away, vowing never to return. As I walked toward the meetup point, torches flashed in my direction, their beams blinding me momentarily. I squinted, recognizing the silhouettes of A and B. "All right, you can turn your torches off now," I hissed, irritation creeping into my voice. "You know it's me." They didn't lower their lights immediately, and B's voice came through the darkness, teasing but cautious. "Calm down, we're just checking you're not a murderer coming to chop us up." They added, "We've been here 10 minutes. My building was uneventful, nothing special. What about you? Find anything interesting?" I forced a casual tone, not wanting to betray the ordeal I just endured. "Well, I found darkness, no floor, pigeon carcasses, and a near-death experience," I said, keeping it vague. "Oh, and a weighing machine that's now broken." Nearly took my eye out. I paused, then added, "There's a second floor with no floor." Weird setup. I raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Did he sense I was holding back? His gaze lingered, and I shifted uncomfortably, trying to deflect. "What about you, eh? Find anything cool?" A's face lit up, his earlier suspicion replaced by excitement. As a matter of fact, yeah. It was surreal. Took a while to get in, everything was boarded up tight, but I found a weak spot where someone had tried to break in before. Inside, it was like stepping back in time. Old computers everywhere, the kind with CRT monitors and floppy drives. I'm a nerd for that stuff, so I was geeking out. He grinned, then grew more serious. But that's not all. There were papers, tons of them, about weird radar research and experiments. It was like the place was abandoned mid-project, like everyone just up and left. B chimed in, pulling something from his bag. I found a souvenir. He held up an antique wooden box. Its surface worn but ornate, like something you'd find in an old ballet studio, the kind that might play a tinkling tune when opened. My curiosity piqued, but a flicker of unease stirred in my gut. "You sure that's okay to take?" I asked. "It might belong to someone." B shrugged, unconcerned. "The place isn't guarded. If someone wanted it, they'd have come for it by now." I hesitated, his earlier excitement fading. "Doesn't it bother you that the place was just left like that? Like something happened?" But curiosity won out, and he nodded to B. "Fine, let's see what's inside." B held his phone's flashlight over the box as it fiddled with the latch. The box creaked open, revealing a hollow interior lined with soft green felt. It was empty, disappointingly so. "Well, that's a letdown," I said, and A and B's faces mirrored my sentiment. But turned to me, his gaze sharp again, like he was searching for something. "So, see, how'd you really do in there?" His tone was probing, almost accusatory, and it set me on edge. He knew I was hiding something, but I wasn't ready to spill. Like I said, I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Not as interesting as it looked from the outside. Just a lot of dark and some broken equipment." A's eyes didn't leave mine, and I felt exposed, like he was peering into my soul. B noticed the tension, his brow furrowing. "Are you okay?" "You've been staring at C like he stole something." A's gaze flicked to B, then back to me. "Yeah, I'm fine. Something just feels off about C, don't you think?" B studied me for a moment, then shook his head. "He looks the same to me. Anyway, let's get to the last building so we can get out of here while it's still dark." We started walking, the path crunching under our boots, and I felt a weight lift as A's attention shifted to the trail ahead. My body relaxed, but my mind didn't. The way A had looked at me, the intensity in his eyes, it reminded me of the feeling I'd had in the building, like unseen eyes were watching me, waiting. As we approached the final, largest building in the compound, I tried to shake off the unease. With A and B by my side, I felt safer, more grounded. Whatever was in that last building, pigeon droppings, cobwebs, or more forgotten relics, it couldn't be worse than what I'd already faced. Or so I thought. Little did I know, that building would be the key to unraveling something far darker, a trigger for events that would haunt us long after we left the compound behind.